Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into something I guarantee you've either seen, experienced, or at least heard your friends vent about: the modern epidemic of narcissism and ghosting. We're going to unpack the really complex psychological machinery behind the toxic relationship behaviors that are honestly dominating today's youth culture. If you've spent any time at all on dating apps, in a competitive workplace, or even just navigating tight friend groups lately, you've probably hit these invisible walls. You know the feeling, right? That sheer whiplash of someone being intensely into you one day and then literally vanishing into thin air the next? Well, today, we're tearing those walls down to figure out exactly what is operating behind the scenes. But hey, before we really jump into the deep end here, I need to give a quick disclaimer. This explainer is strictly for information purposes. If you are seeking any psychiatric consultation or clinical diagnosis, kindly consult a doctor or a licensed medical professional. We're just here today to look at broader societal patterns based on psychological research, basically giving you a lens to understand your experiences rather than handing out medical advice. Okay, let's get into it. So let's kick things off with the million-dollar question that basically defines our modern social landscape. Why is our generation so obsessed with themselves and yet so unbelievably quick to disappear? It's kind of a tragic paradox, isn't it? We're living in an era where we're more connected than ever. Algorithms, feeds, constant notifications, but somehow we find ourselves totally isolated by this growing inability to handle genuine vulnerability. Like, why the massive spike in people who demand absolutely all the attention in the room, but completely vanish the second a relationship requires actual emotional work? To get to the bottom of this, we really have to look at what's driving these two behaviors. Think of narcissism as this blazing, aggressive shield. It's all about feeding and protecting a deeply fragile ego. It seeks this short-term burst of confidence, usually at the expense of someone else. Ghosting, on the flip side, is basically a digital flight response. It's the silent escape hatch, right? People use it to completely bypass the emotional heavy lifting of a difficult conversation or conflict. So they look totally different on the outside. One is super loud and in your face, the other is absolute silence. But they share the exact same psychological root cause: massive emotional avoidance. Let's peel back the layers on narcissism first. This trait almost always begins way back as a childhood defense mechanism. It typically comes from one of two extremes: either severe emotional neglect, where a kid had to invent this grandiose self just to feel visible, or the total opposite: excessive overvaluation by parents who treated the kid like a flawless golden trophy. That kind of upbringing creates this impenetrable emotional suit of armor. So the grandiosity, the bragging, the arrogance, that's just a projection. It's a heavy shield protecting a core that actually feels incredibly inadequate and is terrified of being exposed.
And then there's ghosting. Now get this, ghosting isn't a clinical disorder, it's a coping mechanism, and honestly a glaring symptom of lacking basic emotional regulation. It is the ultimate modern flight response. Growing up in this hyper-digital age where direct conflict resolution is almost never taught, a lot of young folks learn that deleting an app, swiping away a notification, or just blocking a number is vastly easier than looking someone in the eye and saying, "Hey, I'm just not interested." They choose the absolute comfort of silence over a few minutes of awkwardness, taking the easy way out and leaving the other person stranded in total confusion.
So, who's actually pulling these moves? Well, these tendencies are heavily fueled by our modern attention economy, which totally rewards performative validation. If you look closely, you see a few specific profiles. There's the overcompensator, hiding deep insecurities behind heavily filtered posts. There's the highly successful youth, whose arrogance gets a pass because society is obsessed with hustle culture. You've got people with avoidant attachment styles, who desperately want love but are terrified of true intimacy. And of course, the option seekers on dating apps, the ones who treat human beings like interchangeable products on a digital conveyor belt. But you might be wondering, what happens when the mask actually slips? Like, what happens when you stop playing their game, cut off their emotional supply, and they realize you see right through their performance? Well, their reaction to losing that control is usually intense, highly predictable, and if you aren't prepared for it, absolutely overwhelming.
The very second you stop reacting to their manipulation, they experience what psychologists call a narcissistic injury. Because their whole identity and self-worth is built on controlling how you see them, your sudden indifference triggers a massive internal collapse. Without your reaction, your tears, your anger, or your praise, their grand illusion literally shatters. And this doesn't look like normal sadness. It often triggers a disproportionate, explosive rage meant to intimidate you, or a dramatic withdrawal meant to punish you. It's a severe psychological blow to that carefully constructed self-image.
When they're caught red-handed, they don't apologize. Instead, a deeply ingrained defense structure kicks in. They run a very specific playbook designed to make their accountability magically disappear. Step 1, total denial of the facts, just flat out saying it never happened. Step 2, blame shifting. Suddenly, your reaction to their bad behavior is the real problem. Step 3 is gaslighting, a deliberate tactic to make you question your own memory. And finally, if you still don't cave, they'll play the victim, shedding tears meant to drain your empathy so you end up comforting the person who literally just hurt you. Look, if you've ever walked away from an argument feeling totally crazy, even though you had the screenshots, the timestamps, and the cold hard facts, I want you to remember this truth. The intensity of their denial is directly proportional to the accuracy of what you have figured out. The sheer desperation in their gaslighting is actually a confession of their lost control. They wouldn't have to work so incredibly hard to distort reality if you weren't standing dangerously close to the truth. The louder they deny it, the more certain you can be that your instincts are dead on. Okay, but what if you hold your ground and their anger doesn't work? Enter the Hoover cycle. Named right after the vacuum cleaner, it's designed to suck a detached victim right back into the cycle of control. They might suddenly remember your favorite meal, send a nostalgic text completely out of nowhere, or offer this tearful, seemingly heartfelt apology. But do not be fooled. This isn't genuine growth. This is a frantic return to love bombing. It's just a calculated emotional reset to hook you back in so they can regain control and discard you on their own terms next time. And this brings us to the science of why these relationships are so incredibly hard to walk away from. It's a concept called intermittent reinforcement. It's this exhausting, unpredictable back and forth between punishing coldness and sudden, intense charm. From a neuroscience perspective, this actually alters your nervous system. The unpredictable dopamine hits from those rare moments of warmth create a toxic trauma bond. Your brain literally becomes physiologically addicted to the cycle, training itself to associate their approval with your basic survival. Now, if the sweet talk and emotional blackmail fail completely, brace yourself for the preemptive strike. They will often try to control the public narrative before you even have a chance to speak your truth. They'll twist the story to mutual friends, post cryptic stuff online, and forcefully paint themselves as the wounded party. It is a calculated smear campaign to isolate you and ruin your reputation. The whole goal is to secure a new source of sympathy for themselves before your side of the story ever sees the light of day. All right, let's take a quick time out here, because honestly, we can all be a little selfish, moody, or avoidant sometimes, right? We're human, we make mistakes. So it's absolutely crucial to know the boundary between someone who is just a bit self-centered or emotionally immature and someone who is clinically dangerous to your mental health. The real distinction comes down to one thing: adaptability versus rigidity. Someone with just narcissistic traits might hurt you. Sure, but they can adapt. They have what we call clinical insight, meaning they can eventually look in the mirror, feel genuine guilt, and offer a real apology backed up by changed behavior. Narcissistic Personality Disorder, or NPD, on the other hand, is completely rigid and pervasive. They lack that insight entirely. The behavior isn't a passing mood. It's a destructive compulsion that chronically ruins relationships wherever they go. Mental health professionals actually look for a specific framework, known as the 4Ds, to see if a behavior like chronic ghosting or extreme grandiosity has crossed the line into a serious psychological impairment. First, is it deviant, meaning highly extreme compared to cultural norms? Second, does it cause significant distress to them or everyone around them? Third, does it cause dysfunction, messing up their daily life or work? And finally, does it pose a danger? When all these puzzle pieces line up over time, we're looking at a deeply ingrained disorder, not just a bad date. So you're probably asking, what's the cure? Well, the harsh reality is that NPD is what psychologists call egocentric. That means the person's behaviors align perfectly with their ideal self-image. They literally do not see their traits as a problem. They firmly believe the rest of the world is just oversensitive or out to get them. Because of that, you cannot fix them. You can't love them into changing, and you definitely can't debate them into seeing reality. The only path forward for them is intense therapy, like dialectical behavior therapy. For you, your only mission is strictly managing and enforcing your own boundaries. And that brings us to your absolute best weapon against this kind of behavior. When you finally detach, when you stop trying to figure out their motives and replace that confusion with steady clarity, their manipulation just dies. Your ultimate defense isn't arguing back, it isn't seeking closure, and it certainly isn't getting revenge. It's complete, serene indifference. When you reach that point, their rage becomes nothing more than background noise. Their silent treatments become peaceful space for you, and their power over your life completely evaporates. I want you to remember this really powerful thought as you heal.
They tried to make you smaller, and instead, they made you sharper, clearer, more rooted. Surviving a cycle of manipulation and ghosting does not break you. In fact, if you process it right, it rebuilds your self-trust from the ground up. It strips away naive assumptions and forces you to rely entirely on your own intuition. They thought they were breaking you down, but they accidentally made you an absolute master at spotting and rejecting manipulation from here on out.
So, as we wrap up, I want to leave you with something to chew on as you navigate modern dating and friendships. Ultimately, you get to choose the culture you participate in. Are you going to be the one to break the cycle of ghosting and ego games by demanding direct, authentic communication? Or will you let their avoidance and fragility dictate your boundaries? The choice of who gets access to your peace is entirely yours.
Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Just a quick note that this content was prepared by DR.SATYAM Mahaseth. Remember to always trust your gut, fiercely protect your peace, and demand real, authentic connections in your life. Until next time, stay sharp and take care.